Recently, I worked with an organization who brought me in because their team was super nice, but they were not getting anything done. So, this team, you guys, they were so kind to each other and so easy to get along with. They had great lunches. They really enjoyed being together and hanging out. Everyone tended to agree in meetings. They were like, yes, it's a great idea. Let's do it. Then they quietly avoided any real work. They had harmony, they had relationships, they had zero momentum. The leader couldn't figure out what's going on. They're like, this team is better than any team I've ever had in how well they get along. So why aren't we getting things done? Why aren't we moving this thing forward? Here's the reality: collaboration is not about getting along, it's about getting aligned. Harmony is nice, but it is not the goal. Energy is the goal. Momentum and movement is the goal. Harmony might make it feel like a great workplace, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting things done in the way that we need to. So, let me show you what I mean by talking through this team a little bit more. We had that team identify one project where momentum was stalled, where everything was stopped and they really weren't getting anything done. And we traced it back. We talked through the idea. They realized, one of them finally said in the workshop, we start everything, but we don't ever finish. That moment in the workshop was a little bit painful because it wasn't harmonious. Everybody in the room had to an uncomfortable truth. When they started talking about this particular project and each person started sharing what they actually thought, what we found out is they were not in alignment. Every person in the room had a different perspective on what the final outcome of that project should be. Every person in the room was working towards a different goal. Several of them had stopped working on it completely because they felt like other people weren't doing the right things. When we feel like our neighbor isn't in alignment with us and we look over, we're like, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. And we think, well, there's no point in me doing anything either. And so the project had completely stalled. They'd started it, but they hadn't finished it because everybody was moving towards a different goal. They had to spend some time sitting in that conflict and sitting in that non harmonious moment of recognizing that they weren't on the same page. But here's what happened: when we dig into that, when we deal with that conflict, when we let ourselves live in that disharmony for just a few minutes, they were able to decide what their real goal was, what they really wanted the outcome to look like in the end. Then there was energy, there was momentum. That awareness changed everything about how they were doing things and started to move. The biggest thing that that team learned is that collaboration is not passive agreement. It's not everybody saying yes just to say yes and make the room feel happy. It's active engagement. True collaboration means saying, I don't think that's going to work, and this is why. Here's what I think the real goal ought to be. Here's where the outcome could be better, right? That requires friction. It requires stepping into slightly messy situations. It involves clarity in our own thinking, and it requires follow through. It requires being willing to back up what you say and what you think. Your team needs different kinds of energy. You need someone who's a starter, somebody who's a finisher, somebody who's a bridge builder, somebody who's a challenger. You need different people bringing different ideas to the table. One of my favorite things about research around teams is when I learned that the best and most effective teams actually have the most conflict. The most effective teams tend to be the really diverse teams, not the ones where everybody is alike and everybody gets along and there's a lot of harmony, but the ones where there's a lot of diversity, a lot of different ways of thinking, and a lot of conflict. However, those effective teams learn how to harness that conflict to make better decisions and for every person on the team to do their part in their way. Strengths can help us figure out who brings what energy and how to balance it, how to lean into that conflict and that little bit of disharmony to get that energy and that momentum to move everything forward. If this sounds exciting to you and you're a little bit curious about what it might look like to let your team get a little uncomfortable and dig into the hard stuff, I would love for you to download my free guide on 10 ways to lead with connection. It's designed to help you think about this, how to lead in a way that brings connection but doesn't squash conflict. It's full of small shifts that unlock big energy on your team. So that link is in the comments. Let me know, what team have you been on that had a lot of conflict, but still made a lot of things happen?